welcome. It is 7:30 in the evening in India and we are back again with our spotlight on G20. Did you know that as per the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2022, gender parity is not recovering. And at the current rate of progress, it will take another 132 years to reach full parity or close the global gender gap. As the crises are compounding, women's workforce outcomes are suffering and the risk of global gender parity backsliding further intensifies. On India at G20 today, we look at how through Women 20, the Indian G20 presidency can mainstream gender issues in G20 discourse and create a world of equality for women where every woman lives with dignity. I'm Unman Bhattacharya. First up, the top stories. Two-day Women 20 inception meeting begins in Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar in Maharashtra. Inaugural session addressed by Union Minister for Women and Child Development Smriti Irani, MOS Finance, Dr. Karad, Amitabh Kant, India's G20 Sherpa, and Dr. Sandhya Purecha of the chair of Women 20, among others. Discussions on day one focus on empowering the women in nano, micro and startup enterprises, role of women as change makers in climate resilience action, and creating an enabling ecosystem for women leaders at the grassroots. Union Women and Child Development Minister Smriti Irani says women are not just users of technology, but they also leverage technology for women-led development. Calls upon G20 countries to build a framework for women as first responders in climate action. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant says women-led development has to be the key focus to sail through crises such as geopolitical crisis, COVID-19 and debt crisis in 75 nations and accelerate the pace towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Ahead of G20 anti-corruption working group meeting from 1st to 3rd March, Union Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh says India will reaffirm unified action to ensure zero tolerance against corruption and deepen G20 commitments towards countering corruption globally. Our top focus this evening, the two-day Women 20 inception meeting began in Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar in Maharashtra. Discussions on the first day focused on empowering women in nano, micro and startup enterprises, role of women as change makers in climate resilience action, and also creating an enabling ecosystem for women leaders at the grassroots. Here's more on what happened on the first day of the meeting.
Dr. Bhagwat Krishna Rao Karad and India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant. While addressing the gathering, Minister Smriti Irani said that every time a woman stands for herself, she stands for all women.
So on behalf of all the W20 delegates, I wish to extend my gratitude to the Prime Minister of India for centralizing not the women's agency, but for centralizing the needs of humanity. That of the 320 million loans given under a financial service scheme called Mudra, which, mind you, ladies and gentlemen, was not a gendered financial scheme, but a financial scheme that hoped to support enterprise without collateral, 230 million of the beneficiaries turned out to be women. That we need to build a global voice for climate finance. And what better way to build that voice than to make it a female agenda. We all know each time a woman stands up for herself, she stands up for all women.
Meanwhile, India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant stressed on how the world cannot grow and prosper without women's participation.
The Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi was very clear in his mind that all these crises, if we have to overcome them and if we have to push for greater growth and prosperity, women-led development has to be the key focus of India's presidency. If you look at the World Economic Forum study, which says that it will take another 132 years to close the gender gap worldwide. The world cannot grow, it cannot prosper, and it will not be able to bring in inclusive, resilient and sustainable growth without women.
Day one of the meeting saw extensive discussions on the 5 key identified priorities for the meeting. First, empowering women in nano, micro and startup enterprises. Second, role of women as change makers in climate resilience action. Third, women leadership at grassroots. Fourth, bridging the digital divide. And fifth, education and skill development of women. The meeting, taking place on 27th and 28th of February, will also see G20 delegates visiting the magnificent Ellora caves and savor local delicacy. Shreya Upadhyay's and Shyama Mishra's report from Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar in Maharashtra for DD India.
DD India correspondent Shreya Upadhyay caught up with India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant on the significance of the Women 20 engagement group. Take a listen.
So the first W20 inception meeting under India's G20 presidency is being held in Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar in Maharashtra, and I'm joined by the Sherpa of G20, India's Sherpa. Welcome, sir, to Doordarshan. First of all, sir, we're talking about women empowerment, about women-led development. What, according to you, is women empowerment, first of all, and why do we need it in 2023?
No, it's very important because today all over the world more than 50% of the population is more than women. But to bring in gender equity, a recent report says it will take us 132 years more. And only 1 in 3 women are working today, and you need a huge focus on learning outcomes, on health outcomes, on improving nutrition across the world, and to ensure that we are able to provide for better financial resources for the women in terms of gender budgeting, in terms of fiscal measures, in terms of better skilling for jobs. And women are really the key to the growth of the world. So if you want an inclusive, sustainable, resilient growth, you can't do this without women. If you want to do digital transformation of the world, you can't do this without women. If you want SDG transformation, you can't do it without women. And even, to my mind, you can't push for climate action and finance without women. So women really are the key to how the world grows, progresses and transforms in the coming years.
So, you know, this meeting has 5 key priority areas, be it the women leadership at grassroots level, women entrepreneurship, climate resilience and women like you mentioned. You know, when it comes to these key areas, how is India really planning to take the way forward, and what does India bring to the table of G20, a grouping that is so interesting because it comprises both developed and developing countries with different challenges. So what does India bring to the table?
So you saw this tremendous energy in the morning session here because of women from all over the world. And similarly, in every single meeting, you'll have leaders from 20 different countries, plus the 9 invitees, plus from all international organizations. So it's G20 represents 85% of the global GDP, almost 80% of the global trade. And therefore, what is discussed and debated here is critical to what finally is decided and how the leaders want to shape. So these are preparatory meetings which will transform what the G20 is thinking, its final perspective in terms of the leaders' communique is all very important. It's also about how India is shaping the future of the world.
So there you heard it, India's G20 Sherpa saying that women-led development is what is needed right now in the world, whether it's the COVID pandemic or the Russia-Ukraine conflict or several financial crises that we are seeing across the world. Women cannot be left behind when it comes to economic growth and recovery across the world. With video journalist Anil Sable, this is Shreya Upadhyay from Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar, Maharashtra for DD India.
Now let's get further perspective of Women 20. Dharitri Patnaik, Chief Coordinator, Women 20 is joining us from Sambhaji Nagar in Maharashtra. Such a pleasure to have you, Ms. Patnaik, on India at G20. What is the kind of impact that this is going to have on the average women in the G20 or in the Global South, considering that the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2022 has come up with a disturbing finding that it will take 132 years for global gender parity to be achieved, and there is a further risk of backsliding what has already been achieved?
Thank you for having me here. Yes, we've been having all these deliberations throughout the day that how do we really bridge the gap and not take more than 100 years or 100 years to bridge the gap. I think we can definitely change things around us. Things won't change overnight, but we can definitely change things around us, and it would need concerted efforts, not only by the government, the policymakers, but also civil society, business houses, and individuals at every level. And we definitely need a proper ecosystem and an enabling environment to bring about changes.
So how is the Women 20 going to ensure that? I understand that there are 5 priority areas of Women 20. 2 of them are bridging the global digital divide when it comes to gender, and the other one is to bolster education and skill development of women in the G20 countries and NYT countries, many of which are from the Global South.
Yeah, so we've seen that almost 2.7 million people globally are without internet connections, and majority of them are women. We've seen more and more, it's not only in the Global South, but everywhere, that women are disadvantaged when it comes to accessing technology or having the right infrastructure or services for technology, or even the skills to use those technology. We might have a smartphone and Wi-Fi, but we might not be using it properly for e-commerce or for economic activities or for using it for innovations or anything else. So that kind of leaves us behind. And there are many areas globally and regions globally which do not have access to internet yet, or people are below poverty line to even have a smartphone, forget about a laptop or having skills. Or even if they have laptops and smartphones, a lot of people are not trained or skilled to use them properly. So the deliberations we've been having,
Yes, we've lost your audio. Ms. Patnaik, yes, please go ahead.
Priority areas among the 5 priority areas. So, and we will be discussing through our task forces what would be the right policy recommendations and of course action plans. And that's what we've been discussing throughout the day, that only policy recommendations will not help. For every priority area of ours, we need to also come up with the right action plan so that we can suggest those policy recommendations along with the action plans to our leaders.
So there will be policy recommendations and action plans. I understand they will also be related to promotion of women entrepreneurship. Also need your thoughts on a point that was made by Smriti Irani. There is a need for a framework for women as first responders in climate action. We are already seeing that play out in disaster situations. For instance, there were 5 out of 152 NDRF personnel who were women who were rubbing shoulders with men in Turkey in Operation Dost. Besides that, there are women in UN peacekeepers. An Indian major was awarded some time back by the United Nations for the kind of role that she played in gender sensitization in a place like Sudan, for instance. So, there are people who are first responders in different contexts, but in this particular context, why has this context been chosen and what's the way forward?
Yes, so like Honorable Minister WCD mentioned that we should come up with a framework of the first responder, and it's very important because it's women and girls who we've seen are more adversely affected by the climate change or any disaster for that matter. And our priority area talks about having women and girls as change makers for a climate resilient society. And we will be coming up with frameworks in order to not only train and build the capacity of women and girls, but also the measure of impact of what we've been doing. How has it impacted, and how can we scale it up globally?
Right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Ms. Patnaik, for joining us with your views from Sambhajinagar, Maharashtra.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Let's move on now. At the Women 20 Inception meeting, a special session on breaking the barriers will be held tomorrow, where stories of unconventional women will be told. DD India spoke to women in the Indian Navy who shared their journey and how it's like to be in unconventional roles. Take a look.
At the W20 Inception Meet, there will be a special session where the Navy women would be addressing it and they'll be telling their unconventional stories. We have these women from the Navy. Shazia is with us. She is the surgeon in the Indian Navy and she will tell her story as well. Shazia, welcome to DD India. You know, you have been there inspiring the women of India and abroad as well. So at this particular session, how would that be and what story would you like to tell the people?
See, as part of the naval contingent for this G20 W20 Inception Meet, the main aim is to tell the journey we all have travelled, each one of us, so that we can inspire at least a few women with our stories to join the forces, to join, come forward. Because if you have the power, then you should empower others. So that would be my message for this.
All right, that's a very strong message that if you have the power, you empower people. What's your role in the Navy and what's your story like?
Okay, so I am a mechanical engineer and then a PG in naval construction. So I design warships, I repair warships. So my whole idea is that women should enter STEM, basically technical fields, get educated, become engineers and then join the forces or step out in the world and be empowered. So that's the whole idea maybe while I'm here.
All right, so Disha is also with us. She's into Naval Air Force operations and tough job these ladies are doing. What would you say, on the W20 meet that is happening here? How would you inspire the women?
So what I think is, everybody should have their own ideas, and if they have something in mind, then they should go forward for it. So it's like, you should never forget the roots. Everything starts from the roots. So as you grow, you work towards it and get the success towards whatever you dream of, and you should have I can and I will always in your mind, and it is the practice which makes one perfect. So I mean, it's the perfect practice which makes one perfect. So I think the drive towards the perfection is right here.
All right, Swati is also with us. Swati, the W20 meet, what do you think of it, as we go ahead and have the recommendations going into the official communique? So what do you think of the W20 meet?
I think, first of all, this is a very good opportunity for all of us, especially for the women in uniform. And this is the first time we got to be present at this gathering. I would say that this should go on to the next year and to the many years more. And this is the platform which will actually, motivate, seeing so many people from so many countries, so many people like in uniform. We might have other people also from the forces next year. So I think this is a great opportunity and it must go every year.
All right. Okay.
Thank you so much.
So these were the women in uniform who have had, strong roles to play and they have given strong messages. And these were the ladies who would be inspiring other women, not just the G20 member nations, but also the invited nations, the rural women of India and the whole world. They would be inspiring them with their stories. And that is all W20 all about. With camera person Shishir Dikshit, this is Shama Mishra for DD India, Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, Maharashtra.
DD India correspondent Shama Mishra also spoke to Dr. Shamika Ravi, member of Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister and an official Women 20 delegate at the Inception meeting. Dr. Shamika addressed sessions on enabling ecosystem for women leaders at the grassroots and creating pathways for women through education and skilling. Here's what she said.
The W20 becomes a very important platform to mainstream concerns of women. Economic participation, economic empowerment, women-led development is of course our overall mantra. But I think this is where we have had some successful experiments in India. One is in the form of course digitization and the kind of impact it has had on women's participation either through the PMJDY accounts or it is in terms of accessing other amenities, etc. But over and beyond that, we are focusing on care economy. We are focusing a great deal on how to plug the digital divide even further in terms of using different kinds of financial instruments. We are extremely conscious about the fact that climate change will have disproportionate impact on women and children, and I think that representation and the search for solution has to start, and of course that is linked to the financing and other issues, but those are our main concerns.
And DD India correspondents Shama Mishra and Shreya Upadhyay spoke to foreign delegates at the Women 20 meeting. Here's what they said.
Women empowerment is how you ensure that you reap the rewards from the death of your woman leader. Because each and every one of us, each and every woman in the world is a woman leader in her household, in her community, in the highest level of advocacy, which is where we are now in the G20 and the Women 20 as well.
It's an interesting question. It means different things to different people. But ultimately, I don't think that women's empowerment is about being the same as men. I think it's about using the power of women to make a difference. And that is something that I've believed for a very long time, because I don't think the world will ever be a better place if we are all like men and we're all at this apparently powerful level that is occupied by men, but that women are there as women and they make difference as women. And I think W20 does a lot of that.
Indian presidency, you put the women at the center of the development, and a women-led development is very much featured, and I was very encouraged to hear that the Sherpa really made a strong commitment, as well as the Minister of Women and Children. Yes, so I was very, very happy to really learn that. That is something that we need to really do. You know, this is a time for women to be at the center, not the sideline.
It's brilliant. So the welcome was overwhelming. I've never been welcomed that wholeheartedly, and everybody is so nice here and so much committed. So this is really a good start. This morning's speeches were amazing. So I think it started very, very well. The speeches by my colleagues also well done, and I think we are on a very, very good way with the content.
DD India correspondent Shama Mishra toured an exhibition at the venue of the Women 20 Inception meeting, which is displaying local products and handicrafts of Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar in Maharashtra. Take a look.
The objective of hosting a W20 or any G20 meeting at any particular city is to showcase their culture, their tradition, and likewise we are here at Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar where the W20 meeting is happening, and all this is exhibited over here. So if you see over here, self-help group consists a large part of women who are empowering other women as well. All the stories, all the issues that are being discussed here at W20, they consist everything, and we also know for the fact that millet this particular year 2023 is being celebrated as the International Year of Millets, and likewise when we are talking about local products, this is another stall which showcases their products. Apart from that, all these local products are being showcased to the international delegates, and as we all know that Aurangabad or Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar is one place which is known for making the auto components. There are another local products that are being handcrafted, and if you see all these the ones that are present over here, the products that are being displayed over here, they will tell the story of Maharashtra and the story of India. All these products over here, or all these stalls over here, they have a flavor of the priority areas that the W20 meeting is discussing, and all these leaders are discussing, delegates are discussing. This one particular stall is Himru Fabrics, and this is the speciality of this particular place of Aurangabad or Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, and this will be definitely one of those things or souvenirs that the international delegates can take around with them. Lastly, there is one stall over here, large stall of Umaid, which displays all the products that are handmade or machine made by the women, by the rural women, and as we know that it is Maharashtra State Rural Livelihoods Mission. Livelihoods Mission is one particular scheme that is empowering all the women. Each meeting is working towards making women or empowering women economically, and all these stalls put up over here are making them financially strong in some way or the other. With camera person Shishir Dikshit, this is Shama Mishra for DD India, Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, Maharashtra.
And ahead of the first G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting in Gurugram in the Indian state of Haryana from the 1st to 3rd of March, Union Minister of State for Personnel, Public Grievances, Pensions, Dr. Jitendra Singh today said that India will reaffirm unified action to ensure zero tolerance against corruption and deepen G20 commitments towards countering corruption globally. The minister stated that during the 3-day event at Gurugram, over 90 delegates from 20 member countries, 10 invitee countries and 9 international organizations will engage in detailed deliberations on strengthening international anti-corruption mechanisms. The delegates will experience India's culture through specially curated yoga sessions, visit to historic sites, cultural events and local cuisine. Dr. Jitendra Singh stated that since its inception in 2010, G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group has been at the forefront of guiding the anti-corruption initiatives of G20 countries. Its meetings have one chair of the presidency country and one co-chair country. The co-chair for G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group 2023 is Italy. The minister pointed out that as the mother of democracy, India's G20 presidency gives her a golden opportunity to become the voice of the global south in unison with other 19 powers by fast-tracking global anti-corruption efforts, by addressing issues like money laundering, asset recovery and beneficial ownership. He said under India's G20 presidency, nations will deliberate on areas of future action like bringing in processes where fugitive economic offenders can be traced and extradited faster, and their properties situated abroad brought within the reach of the law of the land from which such offenders escape. Apart from the strategic discussions and actions amid the G20 meetings, motor enthusiasts gathered in the Indian capital New Delhi on Sunday to take part in a vintage car rally where classic four-wheelers and two-wheelers from G20 countries rolled out on the roads during the event. Take a look. See you again tomorrow. Namaskar.
पेमेंट फेल। पेमेंट फेल? लेकिन पैसे तो कट गए। गई मेरी मेहनत की कमाई।
हो जाएगी भरपाई, चिंता मत कर मेरे भाई। अगर डिजिटल ट्रांजैक्शन फेल हो जाए, अगर अकाउंट से पैसे कट जाएं, तो बैंक समय से पैसे लौटा देगा, वरना कॉम्पनसेशन का है प्रावधान। नहीं तो आरबीआई के ओम्बुड्समैन को शिकायत करें आप।
योर बिल।
मेरी फीस। आरबीआई कहता है,
जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on Doordarshan, India's national television channel about India's international relations, India's foreign policy, all its dimensions, and also India's involvement in multiple groupings around the world to shape and remake the existing international order. Viewers, in this episode, we are taking up a very pivotal partnership of India, which is with Germany. Germany and India have a strategic partnership for a long time, but there has been a significant upgrade in the relationship, both in the economic as well as in the defense and people-to-people dimensions. So we're going to be discussing India-Germany relations and also how Europe comes in and how Germany, Europe and India together make an important group of like-minded countries. And to discuss this important relationship, I have a very special guest joining us via Zoom from Berlin, Dr. Garima Mohan. Dr. Garima Mohan is Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund. She's a scholar on Europe-Asia relations and also about Europe's increasing engagement with the Indo-Pacific. Dr. Mohan, welcome to Indian Diplomacy.
Namaskar. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Dr. Mohan, Germany and India go back a long way, but the strategic partnership has now reached a higher level with more engagements at the top with leaders of both sides. The intergovernmental consultations that we have has also been expanding. So, seeing India from your side, where you are in Berlin, how does it look, and why is India becoming more central to the way Germany looks at Asia and the Indo-Pacific in particular?
So how Germany looks at India, it has gone through a remarkable shift. When we look at the time when Chancellor Merkel was in power, India was always on the sidelines. Germany's Asia policy was simply put only its China policy, and all the other countries, all the other actors were on the sidelines. This started to change towards the end of Chancellor Merkel's tenure, where conversations about China became more rapid, more tense. The debate on China started becoming more sharp in Berlin. This really came to a head with the coronavirus crisis, where the image of China really plummeted, not just among policymakers, but also among domestic publics. That is when decision makers in Berlin started looking at India, started understanding that they need to create new partnerships, diversify away from China, and they started looking at India in a new light. This is really visible in the coalition agreement of the new German government. Even before they came to power, they had a coalition agreement which mentioned two important things. One, the dangers of reducing, the dangers of over-dependence on China, and two, the need of revitalizing the Germany-India partnership. They mentioned that the Germany-India partnership had not lived up to its full potential by now, and so the new government will focus on that. And we've seen that focus translating into practice. The German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock was in Delhi in December last year, and now Chancellor Scholz is visiting. It is important to note the MEA announced that this is the first time a German Chancellor is coming outside of the intergovernmental consultation mechanism. So the IGCs, for your viewer, this is a mechanism through which Germany and India meet regularly. This is the first time that a Chancellor is coming outside of these consultations, in addition to these consultations, which really shows the importance that India has. And in addition to China, I have to point out Ukraine is also a factor. As soon as this war broke out, many countries in Western Europe, including Germany, realized how difficult it was for them to create coalitions and get the support of partners in the Indo-Pacific, and that's when they realized that they really need to invest in these partnerships, particularly India, and increase their engagement with Indian counterparts. So both China and now the Ukraine factor is an issue why India is suddenly important in debates in Western Europe, but also particularly in Germany.
Yes, and Dr. Mohan, on this Ukraine issue, the German Chancellor's security advisor was in India, and he was saying that we see the world with similar lenses. We don't want war, and we don't want conflict and fighting, and we don't believe in these. And we also have this shared approach of multilateralism in our foreign policy. So in that sense, India in Asia and Germany in Europe do seem to have